Let's bring in Raymond Carr, former FBI special agent and director of the Criminal Justice Institute at Wilmington University. Ray, given what we know at this point and what we just saw in Brian's piece, how do you think they took Nancy out? It looks like going out the back, you go into that rough terrain. There's no way you could carry an elderly woman through that.
I don't think that the back door was an exit. I think it was an entry.
You think that's how they got in?
I think that's how additional individuals may have been let into the home, where the one individual went in through the front. But it's, and I agree with the SWAT commander, that they had to leave from the front of the home because of the blood that was found on the steps and on the porch. There's no doubt in my mind that she left from the front. But there were entries that people were going in from different parts of the home.
So this would prove to you, because there's been lots of speculation that a single person could not have pulled this off. Nancy was 84. She was not able to move very well. It would have been too much for one person to break into the home and carry her out.
Absolutely. You know, I listened to Savannah's interview again, and something that was very notable to me was the fact that she said her brother, who was military, was in the military and was involved in intelligence, thought that his mother was kidnapped. When I heard her say that, it raised a red flag to me, that I thought, how did he come up with that idea, number one? And number two, what did he see and what did he hear that led him to believe that? And I think that's very telling.
And the brother, who has a background in the military, you say, the brother said that right away, like before anybody had given a ransom note, which happened a couple days later?
That is correct. That is what I took from the interview that Savannah said.
The timing of Savannah's interview may not be coincidental. It comes almost exactly 2 months after Nancy's disappearance. You know, this is a case where we have so few clues or leads to the case. Do you think, was this just an interview that she did before she returned to work? It's something she would have had to do to sort of address the tragic elephant in the room, so to speak, before going back on TV every single morning? Or do you think this was also done in conjunction with the FBI to spur more tips and information in the case?
I definitely think it was done in collaboration with the FBI. She's been very cooperative, as her whole family has been. And I think that she spoke with the FBI, and it was kind of scripted at exactly what they want, exactly the message they wanted to broadcast to everyone out here.
What stuck out to you as being as things that you thought, I'll bet she worked with the FBI on the wording of that?
It wasn't spontaneous. The questions weren't spontaneous. It was almost like it was scripted, like, ask me this and I'll tell you this. So it seemed it was pretty, after watching it several times, that's how I feel it was.
Well, let's hope it works. This is a case where we desperately need, police desperately need, the FBI desperately needs some leads in the case. The family's offered $1 million for information. That hasn't shaken loose anything. Maybe finally it will.
It's not about the number of tips that are coming in. It's finding that one tip.
The quality.
That's going to help. Yeah, that's going to help solve the case.
Yeah, Raymond Carr, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, coming up for us.
All right, we have some breaking news. In Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, a source close to the investigation is telling News Nation there were no signs of an assault inside of her home, that the inside of the house was actually clean. They say certain rooms were immaculate. That is actually the word that was used. This comes as we're getting a new theory tied to the back doors of Nancy's home. Senior national correspondent Brian Enton, back on the ground there in Tucson, joins us live. So Brian, let's start with this these newest details saying that there were no signs of assault inside of the home.
Yeah, Nicole, this new information sort of makes sense with the big picture of what we know. The source now confirming to us, a source very close to the investigation, that there were no signs of an assault inside Nancy Guthrie's home, that most of the rooms were described as immaculate. So the house is very, very clean, which would make sense when you go back to what Savannah Guthrie said, that when her sister and brother-in-law showed up, they weren't sure what happened. She had basically just vanished at one point. They even thought maybe like an ambulance had taken her away because, there was now, according to this source, nothing inside the house that appeared totally out of the ordinary. I want to show you this, though, Nicole. Normally, when we talk to you, we're in front of Nancy Guthrie's house. We're actually behind Nancy Guthrie's house right now, very close. This is the back side of her house that we've only seen from drone video up until now, where the pool is, where the back patio is. I'm going to walk as close as we can get here, Nicole, just so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like back here. This is Nancy Guthrie's pool. And then underneath that overhang to the left, you can see the white overhang. Underneath that overhang, there are two doors, which we initially thought were sliding glass doors. They are not sliding glass doors now that we've been able to get a look. They're just doors with panel windows in them. And those are the doors that Savannah Guthrie has said were propped open when the family arrived and realized that Nancy was missing. So it's interesting to get this close to the back of the home, Nicole. Obviously, we still don't know, did the suspects come in through the back and then take Nancy out through the front? Those are still questions that we know investigators are working through. Nicole?
That's a really interesting perspective there, Brian, as these new details are coming in. Brian Inton, live for us there in Tucson. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the question I don't want to ask, but it's the one I keep getting plagued with. Is Nancy's abduction at risk of becoming a cold case? Very debatable. I want to bring in Brian Martin, who has spent his career as a detective solving cold cases, including catching the killer of an 8-year-old girl almost 30 years after her murder. We're lucky to have him. Brian, thanks for taking the time. Is this a cold case or a risk of becoming a cold case?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I don't believe that this is a cold case at this time. We're looking at 55 days, which it seems like a really long time, but I think that there's still a lot of good information out there that's coming in. I think there's a lot of investigative techniques that are being used right now. We're not at a point in this case, I believe, where clues have dried up, information has dried up. I think it's still a very viable, active case to be worked.
The only way I'll push back is you're dealing with a very different kind of victim here. 84 years old, mobility issues. We talked about at the very beginning of this, in need of medication. This limits also what an abductor or abductors can do with somebody like this. Does that change the analysis in terms of whether or not this is becoming a cold case? I mean, Savannah even said in her interview, they don't have any answers. They don't know anything.
So her age definitely is going to play a factor in getting her home and getting her home safely, hopefully. But as far as investigative leads, there's digital information from cell phones, cell towers. There's surveillance video. There's still a vast amount of tips that are coming in this case, and there's still DNA evidence potentially to be tested. So I think all these factor in and show this case is still very viable and still being worked actively. Typically, I would say a cold case is when leads and technology have all dried up and or you start hitting several years into investigation.
So let me ask you this. I understand going back something that Savannah had mentioned. She talked about the ransom notes. She believes 2 of them have been real. Maybe the other one's not so much. You believe they should be released to the public? Why?
As far as releasing those notes, I think that it is something to be considered. I think that releasing those notes and showing the person who drafted those, showing their penmanship, how they write, the verbiage in which they write, there is a very real possibility that someone who knows that individual could recognize the writing, or maybe they misspell, maybe they make a letter in a certain way, and that could be recognized and could provide a very vital lead in this case.
There's something I have been wondering. I keep talking about it. I don't want to forget about it. We have been told that they found forensic material in the house and that it was sent off for possible genetic genealogy testing. You know, you build the family tree, you see who might be connected. It takes time because you not only do genetics, but you also do investigative work. Is there a possibility, and they won't admit this, but we've seen it happen in other cases, they have a suspect or suspects in mind that they're surveilling right now, and they're just waiting for that person to maybe discard a plate, discard a straw, pick it up, check it for testing, match it up to the forensic material in the house. Is that possible, what's happening?
I believe that's entirely possible. Genetic genealogy is very, very strong. And as you stated, there's work to be done. You have to build out those trees. You have to try to identify a suspect. It'll give you a family lineage, but you still have to narrow down who that person could be as far as who your suspect is. And I would expect that if law enforcement has developed a suspect, they're not going to tell us maybe right now. They're not going to tip their hand because that would potentially damage the case.
I thought Savannah's interview was also interesting because she revealed certain things that we didn't definitively know. She talked about what her mother might have been wearing, right? Even saying that she was barefoot. She talked about the back door being propped open. These are details that haven't been fully revealed, some of which I wonder, how does she know this information, and what does it tell you about what may have happened here? Because if I'm correct, I think I'm correct. I don't think law enforcement has even come forward and said there was forced entry at the house.
Well, obviously, law enforcement's communicating with the family. I do find it very interesting that she potentially left without any shoes on, and that there was forced entry.
Yeah, no, it's another component to this. Brian Martin, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
It has now been 8 weeks since Nancy Guthrie vanished from her Arizona home. There have been no arrests, no suspect named, and no confirmed leads on her whereabouts. Another reward is now being offered to help bring the 84-year-old home. The president of Milwaukee's Crime Stoppers putting up a billboard and offering $100,000 of his own money to aid in the search. Savannah Guthrie is now preparing for her return to the Today Show, sharing some new details and emotional revelations during her first sit-down interview. Senior correspondent Brian Inton has the very latest from Tucson.
There's been so much focus on the front of Nancy Guthrie's house where the blood was, but many of the questions now are about the back of the house, because Savannah Guthrie in her interview made very clear that doors, plural, were propped open in the back of the house. We're getting our closest look now at the back of Nancy Guthrie's house because we just put our drone up so that we could see exactly what these doors that Savannah was talking about look like. The assumption was that perhaps they were sliding glass doors, but they're not. You see there's one door under the overhang. This is presumably one of the doors that was propped open. And then there is another door on the back side of the house near the garage. And again, Savannah used the word plural, doors with an S on the end. So the assumption is that both of these doors were propped open when her sister Annie and her brother-in-law Tommaso showed up and realized that Nancy Guthrie was missing. I met up with former Pima County SWAT Commander Bob Krieger to get a feel more for what the back of the house is like.
We're back here and you can't even see her house necessarily. There's just so much brush in the trees, and we're probably 100 feet from it or so. And there's no way they're bringing her back this way.